Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel for my coverage of ACGHK 2021. Now before we begin, I do have to say a massive thank you to both Ryan Kirkwood and also his good buddy Matthew for going out in person and taking this absolutely gorgeous high-res footage. Show the team some love down in the comments below, because without them, this video literally wouldn't be possible. Now, starting off with a brand new line from ThreeZero. We're familiar with the premium line and the DLX scale line. This is what they're calling the MDLX line. It's basically a even further shrunken down version of the DLX style figures, retaining a ton of detail and some die cast as well, but having their own spin on G1 designs. So it's kind of like a concept art series of sorts. They did show off this unpainted prototype for Optimus Prime, and Ryan said he was potentially roughly around 6 inches tall, so that should give you an idea of how small these guys really will be. I personally never had an issue with the new DLX scale. I think that is the quintessential perfect scale for these releases, but nevertheless, I'd be lying if I said these guys didn't look absolutely awesome. Prime is still very early on, but Bumblebee here looks even better. It is a very classic G1 style look. You can tell he is a Volkswagen Beetle. He does still have the G1 style horns, but he's got a ton more detail packed in. As I said, it's kind of like their concept art line of sorts. And they have shown that they can do smaller scale stuff, yet still retain a ton of detail. Just recently on the channel, we looked at their 1/12 scale Terminator figures, and even though they were a little bit rough in some areas, they were still mostly pretty darn fantastic. So I do have high hopes for this line. I think I know the reason why they're potentially doing this. In Hong Kong, collectors don't have a ton of space like we do in the West. They are literally limited to really small apartments and very cramped spaces. So this gives them a chance to pick up their favorite Transformers characters and not have to dedicate an entire shelf to a massive premium scale 18-inch Bumblebee. This is a lot more manageable, so I think that's why they've done it. So yes, I absolutely will be picking up this line. I am curious to say the least. They look fantastic, but we'll have to see if they're too small to be considered high-end pieces when they eventually come out. Now, they did show off their DLX scale line once again, except this is the Bayverse series, so they have two distinct series going on. They have these with the very classic 2007 onwards designs, and then they have the Bumblebee line, which we'll take a look at in a moment. You can see here we have the Revenge of the Fallen Optimus Prime, and he looks pretty darn fantastic. I'm pretty vocal about the fact that this isn't really my ideal look for Prime, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I'm actually really darn excited to get this guy in hand. The sculpt, the paint applications, the intricacy. This guy literally looks like the CGI model translated into figure format. The proportions, it is on point. And then, of course, we do also have the big, honkin', massive, shelf-present stealer being the Jet Power Optimus Prime. This guy is the combination between Jetfire and Optimus Prime. I'm not exactly sure if it's going to be one of those where you actually have to pull apart Jetfire and plug the pieces onto Prime. I'm pretty sure this is a separate purchase, which to me is a very good thing. I don't want to have to buy 2 Jetfires and 2 Optimus Primes so I can have the various looks on display. I'd much rather get Prime and Jetfire and then opt in to purchase the Jet Power Prime separately. I think that's the absolute best way of doing it. But the cool thing here is they are chock full of detail. Say what you will about the Michael Bay-verse era of Transformers, there was definitely a lot to look at, as there is here in figure format as well. This guy is massive and chock full of intricate, small moving parts and pieces. And of course, diecast as well. We do also have Jetfire, and this guy is huge. He's not quite as big as the premium scale figures, but I'd say he's getting darn close. He is hunched over, of course, as he was in the film. He's a SR-71 Blackbird, and you can tell, even though he is a kind of big honkin' mess of parts, you can tell what plane he's supposed to be, and I really like that. I am curious as to how well he's going to articulate due to having to have this chicken leg kind of hunched over look about him, but nevertheless, I will be reviewing them on the channel. Now, we do have a con exclusive for this year, and he was sold in limited quantities at ACGHK. I'm trying my best to pick him up to get him and review him on the channel. It's, of course, the shattered glass version of Soundwave. I love the color scheme here. The blue and the white with the green bandana. And of course, Ravage has that paint job as well. They look better than ever. I'm a huge fan of G1, as you all know, but this shattered glass design really catches the eye. It's very, very striking amongst all of these other DLX scale figures. I am curious, do let me know which do you prefer, just the standard look for Soundwave or this new shattered glass version. Another exclusive that was shown on display was this, the gold edition version of Bumblebee. Now, I think they could have just gone for it and called him Goldbug, because technically that's what they're paying homage to. It's literally a gold repaint version of their regular DLX Bumblebee, who was already fantastic, and I really like it. It's one of those that you don't need to complete the line, but if it's something that you do want in your display, say you prefer Goldbug to just the regular look for Bumblebee, yeah, you can totally do that, and it looks awesome. They did show a couple that have already been released. This guy right here, though, the Nemesis Prime from the Netflix series, I need to have it. I definitely will be trying to source it and review it on the channel, because yes, this is also just a repaint of Optimus Prime, but for those of you who don't know, he's actually going to appear in Season 3. Kingdom, so it's a character that's actually seen in the series. Speaking of which, we do also have Megatron and Optimus Prime, who are also in the War for Cybertron series, and then the rest of the Bumblebee ensemble, plus the shattered glass version of Optimus Prime, which I was lucky enough to be able to pick up. I still, to this day, don't own the G1 colored version of Blitzwing. I'm still trying to find him. If I do, you'll see a video on the channel, but for now, that's one that I don't currently own. I have to say, I love this DLX line. It might just be the best thing that ThreeZero have done in recent memory. I mean, there are a couple more things coming up which gets me incredibly excited, but these figures have had a massive positive buzz around them since the first came out, and I think it's for good reason. They are among some of the most detailed in terms of sculpt and paint applications, the most articulated, and the heftiest as well, because they have a ton of diecast on the inside and also on some of the outside panels as well. They're basically the ultimate Transformers collectible, if you ask me. Now, I know, don't head down to the comments and tell me, oh, well, Justin, they don't transform. Totally aware of that, but to me, these are just the ultimate representations of the characters themselves. If you want something that transforms, you can do that. You can go the movie masterpiece route, for instance. But for me, I'm not a huge fan of packing in the transformation gimmick at the expense of paint applications and sculpt, and unless you're going with those unlicensed figures, 9 times out of 10, the official releases don't look anywhere near as good as these ThreeZero ones. Now here we have the premium line on display. It's been a while since we've seen a new announcement in this massive scale, but I'm totally fine with that. The premium line is the best of the best. There's no two ways about it. It does seem like, going forward, the DLX line will be their focus. Speaking of the DLX line, they've also started to dip their toe in the Marvel pond with their Infinity Saga line. Also, DLX scale, which means there will be diecast and they are slightly smaller. I'm pretty sure they're aiming for true 1/12 scale here. Just recently on the channel, I reviewed the Comic Cave Studio version of the Hulkbuster. For those wondering which one is better, I will be reviewing this one and comparing it to the other version. But for now, people have said this guy will have less diecast, but more articulation, so hopefully that gives you an idea of which one you'd like to go with. But he looks great, the proportions look on point, the sculpt is really sharp and strong, he will of course light up, and one of the biggest benefits is the articulation. Even though they just have him standing here in the display, he can literally pull off a ground pound pose. Yeah, a Hulkbuster can do that, it's insane. And, for good measure, you can put the Mark 43 on the inside. That's one thing you cannot do with the Comic Cave version. It has a little bust in the chest area, but this one, you can fully open up all the panels and insert the Mark 43 in there. I've never been a huge fan of doing that. I would much rather just have a bust in there and then display my Mark 43 separately, because I feel like just shoving him in the chest and closing it up kind of does a disservice to the Mark 43, because it's a really cool armor in its own right. But just know that if you did want to, you can fully store your Mark 43 inside this Hulkbuster. And speaking of the Mark 43, here it is. Now, I personally am not a huge 1/12 scale collector. I collect the odd bits and pieces here and there, but I do have my eyes keenly focused on ThreeZero with this new line. If I was going to go all out on a company's 1/12 scale line, yeah, I'd probably bet on ThreeZero at this point. They have some amazing licenses on the go, and they've done some amazing work, specifically in this very line, the DLX scale line. So them now doing Marvel, I think is a really great idea. And the Mark 43, how does it look? I think it looks awesome. Once again, I know I've already said this, but the sculpt is very, very sharp. You can see all the panel lines and the detail. The paint applications look stunning as well, with a punchy, vibrant red and that muted champagne gold. He does look how he should. I love the proportions here. That's one thing that I think ZD Toys do really well, and ThreeZero are doing well here also. They get it to look like a real person, how the suit does on film, whereas some other companies sort of play with the proportions to get it to look a little bit more dynamic perhaps, or get a little bit more articulation in there, whereas ThreeZero, it seems, are doing the best of both worlds. They're also showing off some massive life-size statues. In Hong Kong, you will find some collectors actually are able to buy these. It's not really for us in the Western market, but I have seen a lot of storefronts in Hong Kong with these 1/1 scale pieces. I mean, Hot Toys also makes 1/1 scale pieces, and so does Queen Studios. Now, moving on to their G.I. Joe line. Awkwardly enough, this Storm Shadow, for some reason, has a White Ranger label on him, but he does have these awesome Wolverine claws. This is kind of like the Arctic version of Storm Shadow. I haven't seen anything to do with G.I. Joe or read any of the comics, so do let me know if this is from a specific run down in the comments below, but I love the way it looks. They also had the Dead Game red version of Snake Eyes, and I love this. The red is dark, deep, and dingy, but it plays off very nicely all of the black strapping. He does still have the exact same accessories as the regular Snake Eyes that I reviewed on the channel, so check that out if you'd like to see more. We did also get a sneak preview here of the Storm Shadow meant to go along with the Snake Eyes that I reviewed, and he looks great. He does, however, have seamless arms, so I am worried about posing for the long term, but we'll have to wait and see when he does come out. Now, this display right here had me over the moon, because they're showing, for the first time, their Lord Drakon. And if you don't know, I'm a huge Power Rangers fan. Them showing this means that they'll be dipping their toe in the Boom Studios comic book line as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a Ranger Slayer, and that has me even more excited. This line right here might just be my favorite thing that ThreeZero have ever done. Now, I know some people have issues with the accuracy of the morphers and the Dragon Shield on the Green Ranger and some of the helmets and the weapons, but with all of that being said, I think these are the best 1/6 scale Rangers to date. They have more accurate helmets than some of the other ones that we've seen from various companies, and I reckon they'll have the best articulation. Plus, they do have that shiny look to the spandex, and the seams in all the right places that's accurate to the real suits. The pinstripes on the belts, they're all there. The Green Ranger has his gold morpher. So yeah, I personally am really happy that they decided to do this, and going forward, I would love to see some villains. Putty patrollers perhaps, maybe a multi-pack. I think that would sell really well for the Ranger fans out there. Here are a couple of high-res pics though of the Rangers themselves. Lord Drakon stealing the show for me personally. I mean, he just looks like a total badass. But the cool thing about these, even though, yes, some of the bits and pieces aren't 100% accurate, is that they look good. In my opinion, the number one thing is, in the display, do they look as they should? And do they look cool? I think these have that toyetic cool factor, whereas potentially some of the other 1/6 scale Rangers who got the helmets slightly wrong looked a little bit goofy, and that's definitely what you don't want. Whereas these guys and gals have that cool factor, and I think that's the most important thing here. Don't get me wrong, accuracy is still number one, but if you don't quite do that, then yeah, cool takes a close second. Alright, now moving on to another company's display, this is Flame Toys. Now, Flame Toys are known for their amazing model kits, and that's exactly what these Rangers are. I'm loving all the Power Rangers love right now. It's a great time to be a Power Rangers collector. And yeah, these are fully articulated Power Rangers model kits. I'm all in on this line as well. I love my model kits, and I love my Power Rangers, so when you put them together, you get a pretty darn badass line. I'll absolutely be looking out for the pre-order on these awesome figures, and I'm hoping they do a green and white Ranger at some point as well, because, yeah, we need the complete set. They also showed off some pretty early grayscale prototypes of this, their Dino Megazord. It's a very stylized version. If you'd asked me if I would have preferred just a straight up show accurate one, I would have said yes, absolutely, but we have that in the Super Mini-Pla line. This is a bigger scaled piece, and it's their own unique design, and boy do I love it. It's so badass. It's a really overly stylized look to him, but I think it works a treat. I mean, it's still quintessential Megazord. It has all the right trappings. He's got the power sword. He's got the Zords in all the right places, but still, they've made him look even cooler. It's kind of like what I was expecting to see in that reboot Power Rangers film. If they'd gone with this design, I think they would have sold quite a few more Megazord toys, because yeah, this looks totally fantastic. I am curious though, do you hate the fact that they have made these changes to a very iconic design? Do let me know down in the comments below. I'm also noticing something really cool is that the tail of the Pterodactyl Zord is the power sword. I love that because it gives you a place to store the darn thing. That's one of the most annoying things about the Soul of Chogokin guy, because you don't really have anywhere to store the power sword when he's not using it, where this right here is a genius weapon storage placement. Next up, we have their Transformers line. Now, they do model kits, which is what we're seeing in front of us right here, but they also do just fully articulated figures, so they do kind of the best of both worlds. They also do their own unique spin on G1 designs and the IDW looks from the comics. I personally really love their work here. I will be trying to pick up more of these model kits sometime down the line. I did grab pretty much all of the Seekers, Bumblebee, Megatron, and Optimus Prime, both in regular color and also in Nemesis format. And yeah, I plan to pick up even more because I love my model kits. They did also at one point show off a Devastator who looked fantastic, very G1 inspired, but just a slight bit of modernizing going on. I'll definitely be trying to pick him up as well. Next up, we do have this display right here, which is their sort of pre-assembled figures, their big, large-scale pieces that do command a fairly hefty price tag. Here we have a Victory Leo who is absolutely massive and has so many intricate parts and pieces, plus a Star Saber. Now this isn't the Star Saber that you'll know from the cartoons, the anime if you will. This is their own style, like they like to do. And then of course we have the fully combined look as well, which looks absolutely insane. If you wanted a centerpiece for your Transformers display, this Victory Saber right here, yeah, I reckon he'd take pride of place. We do also have a Nemesis colored version, and the purple and black works for me. We also, once again, have a purple and black colored version of Victory Leo. So they are getting their use out of the mold, but I can't fault them for that. The cool thing is you do have an option if you want to go for a Decepticon colored version, as I know a lot of people like to do. You can totally make that happen for your display. If I was to ever go ahead and pick up any of these figures in the line, I probably would just stick to their straight up normal colorations. I do, however, love this look for Megatron. This is his bomber look, his B2, I'm pretty sure it's a B2 bomber. Either way, I love how this guy looks as well. And of course they have him standing up right alongside the Jet Power armor version of Optimus. This guy looks totally awesome. He does look really good. As good as the DLX one from ThreeZero? Well, you'll have to be the judge of that. But for now, this is a relatively early prototype. It's still in the grey primer colour, so I think it's quite a while off. I don't have a massive amount of experience with this line. I haven't picked up anything, in fact, from this line right here. I am tempted. I have heard really good things about their first figure, which I'm pretty sure was Drift. So, yes, maybe at some point I will take a look at grabbing some of these, because I like the design. That Hot Rod or Rodimus right there is a very stylized look, and I'm pretty sure it's from the IDW comics, but do correct me if I'm wrong down below. We do also have a Jazz who has these weird kind of big blades on his arms. Maybe they're meant to replicate his doors? I don't think they're overly necessary to the design. You're probably going to be able to remove them, however. A version of Optimus Prime from Beast Wars. This one, of course, is the Leo Convoy, or here they're calling him Leo Prime. I've never been a huge fan of that look for Optimus, but this one, heck yeah, I'm all for it. It's a Beast Wars inspired look for Optimus Primal, and they've put their own unique spin on it once again. Plus, it seems they are dipping their toe in the waters with some G.I. Joe stuff, showing off a Snake Eyes, a very early prototype mind you, but it still looks rather interesting. Moving on to Sentinel. Now recently, I did review their Miles Morales figure from Into the Spider-Verse, and I thought it was pretty good. It wasn't 100% perfect, but they did some really good stuff. And then after that, I picked up that Captain America right there. It's called the Fighting Armor version of Cap. The review is currently live for channel members, if it isn't for everyone else at the time this video is released. But I loved it. It really took me by surprise. It's full of diecast. The articulation is insanely good. So this line right here, I'm actually in on, which I never thought I would be able to say that, but they're showing Black Panther, Thor, Loki, Deadpool, Spider-Man. This line, it looks like has legs, which I'm really happy about. They're also showing more into the Spider-Verse stuff with Penny Parker and also the Spider-Bot right here. I'm pretty sure he's called SPDR. Yeah, they look great. It looks like Penny is not an articulated figure, unfortunately, but due to her scale, I can totally understand that. They also have the Peter Parker sitting there on that massive gargoyle head. Yeah, it's really, really big, and I will be planning on reviewing that as soon as it does come out. Moving on to a company I don't have much experience with, but it's Morstorm. Now, they do these model kit versions of Iron Man figures, which look really, really good. I have been told quite a few times that I need to take a look at these figures, and yes, at some point I probably will, but they look really, really cool. I'm not exactly sure what kind of scale this is. It might be 1/10 or 1/9, But the detail in the sculpt, because it's a model kit and they're all separate pieces which snap together, they can have really sharp defined lines and creases, and you can paint them yourself. So if you want to go all out with the detail, you can totally do that. And it does look like they come with a ton of accessories, which of course is a huge plus, and a dynamic flight pole display base. These are kind of the ultimate version of model kits if you ask me. And we do have a pretty wide array from the Mark 46, 47, 50, 85, and Rescue as well, which I can't tell if these have been painted or not, because they may not look this good when you just snap them together and build them. But if they do, they're onto a winner. These might just be my favourite smaller scale Iron Man figures due to the amount of stuff they come with, and the fact that they are model kits. Now, they are also making some other characters. I don't know how far along in production some of these are, but you can see a Spider-Gwen, Black Widow, and then of course an Iron Spider. That's right up their alley. He does look a little bit too bulky. For those wondering what Hot Toys Iron Spider would look like if they went fully jointed, he would look like this. Fully bulky and not quite as accurate to the film. But this right here is what I'm here for. Mark II, Mark IV, and the War Machine Mark IV, which is an absolute tank. So that means they are going in on this line. They're going to make more. They're going into the back catalogue. They're not just doing a one and done, which I appreciate. So yeah, I will potentially be reviewing this stuff. All of those who have asked, yes, this is something I'm interested in looking at on the channel. And they're also showing off a Thanos prototype who is pretty darn massive. I'm fairly sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm fairly sure they're 1/9 scale, so they are relatively large. Next up, we have some YoloPark stuff, and we will be closing out the convention coverage by looking at the biggest, the baddest YoloPark Optimus Prime, but they showed off this guy, which is a smaller scale Shockwave. I'm fairly sure he will be able to scale perfectly alongside the ThreeZero DLX figures, so when this guy gets solicited and they show pics, I'll be making my decision whether or not I want to add him to the shelf. Shockwave is one of my favourite characters in G1, and this design is so darn beautiful. So yeah, I'm really happy a company is making him, and this is also a shrunk down version of their Optimus Prime, who is a big beefy boy, and he comes with an axe and his ion cannon. The axe wasn't seen in the film, but maybe in Rise of the Beasts we'll see a little bit more G1 style Optimus Prime action from this guy right here. Moving on to their big centerpiece display, they had of course their massive Optimus Prime on show. And if you're a huge fan of the Bumblebee movie, and I mean huge fan because I'm pretty sure this guy runs around $3,000 US, then this guy might be for you. For me personally, it's a little bit too rich for my blood. I'm not going to complain about the price because I know how much work goes into this. There are so many moving parts and pieces, real working pistons and pulleys and chains, and fully articulated fingers down to every knuckle and joint. This guy is the ultimate G1 Bumblebee movie Optimus Prime. So for those who want to pick this up, I don't blame you, he looks awesome. And did I mention he was massive? Here we have Matthew for scale reference. Now, they did also show off this guy, which is a Cybertronian alt mode version of Bumblebee in the same scale as Prime. I'm not exactly sure why ThreeZero didn't make the chest plates swappable on their premium and DLX scale ones to give us this look as well. And these guys are also giving you a teeny tiny little car version of him so you know exactly what he transforms into. Now this will be the last thing we look at the show, so I have to say a massive thank you to both Ryan and Matthew for their brilliant coverage. Show them some love in the comments below, and let me know which thing you're most excited to see. Check out the link to 6 Scale Network down in the description. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.